Healthcare is too expensive. Employers are offsetting costs onto their employees. Who will make health benefits affordable for hardworking Americans and their families? You will. This is the Empowering Plans Podcast, a show dedicated to helping you once again emphasize the benefit in benefit plan. Now prepare to learn, plan, save, and protect with the FIA Group.
All right. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today on another edition of the CNC Subrogation Factory. My name is Chris Aguiar, Vice President here with the FIA Group. Cindy Merrill will not be joining us today, so you only have one half of the CNC clan. Andrew, just to give you a little bit of background on that, they started putting Cindy and I together like all the time, and I started kind of branding us a little bit. So that's why I've now dubbed us the CNC Subro Factory, and you're a special guest today.
That's catchy. Happy to be here.
I figured you'd like the music link there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Andrew, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Andrew Silverio. I'm happy to be on here with Chris again. Chris sort of shepherded me along when I first joined FIA way back when, almost a decade ago, doing subrogation. It's I had my 9-year anniversary recently. So I was doing subro. I've been out of the subro game for a while now, working in consulting. So it'll be cool to catch up, see what's new, and what's developed in the last couple of years.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I'll be honest to all the loyal listeners out there. I'm going to hop on a soapbox a little bit. I have an agenda today, and I'm going to push that agenda. It's been really interesting, and I guess this has always kind of been the case, but recently it just feels like it's been more of a problem. And I've decided that it's time we make subrogation sexy again. Bringing subro back, if you will, to take a page from Justin Timberlake's book. It's starting to become very apparent that we don't do a great job at educating. And by we, I don't mean FIA per se. I mean the industry. I mean the TPAs. I mean all the service providers. We don't do a real good job at educating plans when they're coming over the self-funded world, or when they're coming to self-funding, sort of like a more TPA model versus an ASO model, which we know the ASO models tend to kind of walk like, talk like, feel more like a fully insured arrangement. And what's happening is these plans, they don't understand what's going on. Imagine you're a self-funded benefit plan and you come over from a fully insured world. You could go a few years without knowing anything about subrogation, without having any idea that subrogation is happening on your plan, because the vast majority of cases are worth $20,000 or less. 85% of the cases that come through our doors are automobile accidents that are worth less than $20,000. And as you go down those sort of financial brackets, 15,000, 10,000, those numbers expand. It's something like 30% of, and I could go get the real numbers, but something like 30% of the cases that come through the door are like $5,000 or less. So you can imagine how, if you've got a pretty well-run subrogation program, groups don't have any idea it's happening. They are just kind of getting checks. They're not questioning what they are. And then all of a sudden, they get the large loss. They get the catastrophic loss, the 18-wheeler, the $1 million in injuries. And, I, most of the time, have the unfortunate reality of having to go to that plan and say, 18-wheeler is not a great example, but, most people have $100,000 in policy limits. I have the unfortunate job sometimes of having to go to that plan and say, hey, look, even when I crush it, right? Let's say I get a ton of the money back. Let's say on $100,000 of policy limit, I get $80,000. That would be an unbelievable outcome. Would you agree, Andrew?
Yeah, that's a big win for sure.
But in that case, here's the conversation that then happens to the plan. Hey, plan, there was only $100,000 available. You should be pretty psyched that we were able to get 80 cents on the dollar, considering there's a lawyer who's supposed to take 30 cents on the dollar, which means we were actually able to reach into the lawyer's pocket and take some of his money too. Wow, we're unbelievable. Unfortunately for you, plan, you're not going to see any of this money, because by the time we take out fees and stop losses reimbursed based on their first right of reimbursement, sorry, there's nothing left to reimburse you. And more I get plans that have no idea that they have this stop loss policy. They have no idea how the stop loss arrangements work. And they are confused, upset, feeling like everybody else is kind of profiting and they're getting nothing. And just a bad situation. Of course, plans are going to have bad taste in their mouth. And I really think it goes back to the fact that subrogation is not sexy. It's not interesting until it is. And then it's a big problem. And I really think we have to kind of get better, either at implementing, and that's at the TPA level or at our level, making sure the plans understand exactly what's happening, exactly what, administrative functions are occurring, and how it actually impacts them, making them understand why, in the vast majority of cases, certainly in the large losses, it's actually pretty rare that there's enough money to go around, and they should thank their lucky stars they have stop loss, right? And kind of understand the dynamics of how it all works. I guess I'm a little out of touch on what you're doing these days, Andrew. Consulting, I guess you jump around a little bit, but do you find that the benefit plans sort of have no clue what's going on or what the service providers below them are handling? How does this parallel to your world?
Yeah, we're actually seeing a lot of that. And it's a challenge, not just that plans, aren't invested in knowing what's going on with their vendors and even like their internal setup, but a lot of them don't want to know what's going on. There's a lot of employers that go into self-funding because of numbers. They see, okay, we can save 20%, year to year on our healthcare expenses if we self-fund, but they don't want to be involved in the day-to-day or have to worry about making claims decisions, right? So, not only do us as an industry not do a great job educating employers on this sort of thing, but a lot of employers don't really want to be educated, don't really want to be involved. And we need to try to change those mindsets as well. We see this a lot in level funding, which is a very popular and growing in popularity structure of stop loss, where they really try to mirror the fully insured experience, where you split it up monthly, where, instead of a $240,000 annual deductible, you have like a $20,000 monthly deductible. And these programs are sold a lot of the time to employers in a way that's vague at best, and I would even say deceptive at worst sometimes, where we've had plenty of calls with employers who are seemingly being told for the first time, or it's just hitting them, they're understanding it for the first time, that self-funding is different from fully insured group insurance.
Yeah, that's because for all intents and purposes, they were told it was a high deductible, fully insured plan.
Right. They were told that their $20,000 a month exposure is their exposure. That's their risk, and it's capped. And it's really not, right? It's capped until stop loss denies a claim, and then it falls to them, and they're surprised to hear that that's going on. So it's a lot of the same issues.
Yeah, it's interesting. You say they don't want to learn, they don't want to know, they don't want to be involved, they don't want to be educated. Okay, great. Then let me do my job, right? Because
right.
The truth is they don't want it until they have that large loss. And then, they're questioning my motives and they're questioning our fees on the back end after I've done all the hard work. And I know it's hard to be on the ground with everyone all the time, but I just feel like more and more these groups are getting introduced to their vendors. And again, this happens to me constantly. Introduced to their vendors in the middle of a bad situation. And they're in the middle of that bad situation. They didn't really understand what they were getting themselves into. And now they're having to learn in a crash course when there are, significant dollars at stake, when there are real kind of outcomes in play. And it creates such a difficult situation, contentious situation. And it's fascinating because obviously my job, I have maybe one of the more contentious jobs in the company, right? Because, there's a self-funding, cost containment is a spectrum, and there's all these different mechanisms. Most of the folks at the organization are actually helping participants. They are negotiating out-of-network bills. They're negotiating sometimes in-network bills. They are negotiating balance bills. Andrew is often helping plans figure out how to craft language that, does what the plan needs to do, or, just answering questions to help plans figure out, are the claims payable? Can the plan pay the claims? Or does payment of the claims run afoul of the stop loss policy? Every single case I touch, I am taking settlement money from people who were injured. And so I call myself the underbelly of cost containment. And so it just feels like my world is already contentious. I just wish I wasn't always so contentious with the clients too. And I really feel like education is the key. And whether it's providing clients with the tools they need to educate, or just asking the clients for access to the group so that we can give them sort of the information they need. Because I don't know if it's like the full moon or the poor air quality coming from Canada, or just, times are tough, inflation's high, and people are feeling it. It just feels more and more like we're all fighting against each other when we should be focused on trying to position the plans in the best position possible. It's been a frustrating world for me in that regard. It's interesting to hear that you're seeing it on your end as well, Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that was my soapbox. In terms of what's happening in several these days, Andrew, there's some pretty interesting stuff, I guess. The Ninth Circuit just came out and said that offset is an appropriate remedy, even though the Supreme Court has indicated that plan has no remedy outside of 502A3. The Rutledge case, I think, is potentially threatening the relation to standard that we've all come to know and love with respect to preemption in ERISA. And those are the two big things that have kind of gone down in my world of late. What's big coming out of your world?
Everybody is scrambling to get ahead of all of the new filing requirements, the new gag clause attestations, prescription drug data filing requirements, everything that came out of the CAA, 2+ years ago. We're still trying to catch up, and that's a daily challenge for sure.
I'm not at all familiar with that. What's the CAA?
The Consolidated Appropriations Act that gave us the No Surprises Act.
Got it.
It also gave us some new broker compensation disclosure rules, a requirement for plans that they can no longer enter into contracts with a provider, organization that connects them with providers like a TPA or a network that has a gag clause, anything that would prohibit them from disclosing quality or pricing information to a provider, to a plan participant, to a business associate. And if you've ever looked at a direct provider contract or a network access agreement, every single one has some sort of gag clause. It's going to say in your confidentiality provision that any pricing information is proprietary. So
absolutely,
every single one of those contracts is going to need to be amended, and plans have to file an attestation every year saying they don't have any gag clauses. For most plans, it's going to be a real heavy lift to get there, to be able to attest to that.
And so the CAA, does that bind the networks? Because to your point, it's the networks that are pushing these gag clauses in a lot of these cases. So are the networks also bound?
That's a huge hole in most of these requirements. For example, all these new requirements for plans to, publish provider pricing information and claims data. Most of the plans don't have any of that data. They have to get it from their network, from their TPA, from their PBM. But there's no requirements imposed on any of these organizations. So they're free to just say, no, we're not going to give you the data you need to comply with your new legal requirements. It's an issue.
Fascinating. It sounds like something that AI is not going to be able to replace anytime soon.
Knock on wood.
Yeah,
as much as I like AI, I like having a job as well. So we're okay with it.
I think we'll be okay for a little while. So usually we talk, it's all things subro, but bringing in a little bit of an outsider here. Andrew, I don't get to talk to you that much, especially now that you're out in the Midwest. Is Ohio considered Midwest? Yeah, right.
Yep.
It is.
Absolutely.
It's good to have you on, and here's some of my musings at least.
Yeah.
And it's good to know I'm not feeling it alone, that other people are going through it too.
Yep. A lot of the same, fears and motivations and issues just sort of reach across service lines, and we're all feeling it in different ways.
All right. That makes me feel a little bit better today. So I'm glad we had this talk, Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Anything else that you think is interesting to bring up, Andrew?
I'm good. We've got plenty going on. We could fill 10 podcasts with different issues, but I think we're good for now. And I will say to tune into our upcoming webinars. We've got a lot going on, the CAA, all these different requirements that I talked about. Definitely keep an eye on it.
All right. Fantastic, Andrew. Again, great to have you on. Great to talk to you. Thank you to everyone who listens. I've recently learned that people do actually listen, so that's always interesting. Until next time.